The rain hammered against the hospital windows, blending with the chaos inside. Zariah wiped sweat from her brow, trying to steady her hands as she managed one crisis after another. Then he appeared, Cassian Hart, the billionaire CEO, eyes wide with panic as he stumbled toward her. You're struggling alone?" he asked, voice breaking, disbelief and awe tangled together. Zariah froze, heart skipping a beat. I manage," she whispered, though the exhaustion lining her face betrayed her. Cassian stepped closer, eyes locked on hers. "You don't have to. Not anymore. Let me help." And in that instant, amidst fear, chaos, and the unspoken tension between them, their lives collided, forever changing both their destinies. Little did Zariah know, helping him that night was just the beginning, the first step in a journey filled with heartbreak, betrayal, and a love that would challenge everything they thought they knew about themselves. Before we dive into Zariah's story, I want to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. I'd love to feel connected with you, hear your voice, and know that no matter where you are, we're all sharing this journey together. Zariah Wells, 28, stood in the center of the executive boardroom, still wearing her navy scrubs, her badge crooked after 12 hours in the emergency room. The walls were glass, cold, and towering, and every man in a suit stared at her like she didn't belong there at all. The air felt too quiet. Just 2 hours earlier, she had saved the life of the company's CEO, a man she barely knew, except by reputation. Now she was being summoned as if she had committed a crime. Her palms were trembling, and the smell of antiseptic from the hospital still clung to her. Cassian Hart, 33, tall, sharp-jawed, and colder than the room itself, leaned against the end of the long table. He was the kind of man people described as untouchable, the kind whose picture showed up in business magazines. Tonight, his skin looked pale with exhaustion, yet his eyes carried something darker. He didn't thank her for saving him from a panic attack in the middle of his company's gala. He didn't even acknowledge the moment she kept him breathing while everyone else froze. Instead, he focused on her like she had done something wrong, like she had humiliated him instead of keeping him alive. "You caused a scene," Cassian said quietly, but his voice cut like a blade. His fingers tapped the table, controlled and sharp. The board members whispered among themselves. Zariah swallowed, unsure if she should defend herself or stay silent. Everything about this room felt dangerous. She tried to speak calmly, though her chest tightened. "Sir, I only followed protocol." "You collapsed." "I had to act fast. People were recording. I couldn't stop them." Her voice wavered. She wasn't scared of him, she was scared of the way they all looked at her, like she didn't deserve to stand upright. Cassian pushed off the table and stepped closer. Zariah forced herself not to flinch. She had survived worse, racist professors, patients who refused her care, co-workers who pretended not to hear slurs tossed in passing. But something about this moment felt heavier, like her entire future was trapped inside his silence. "You think this is about a video?" he asked, his tone low. "It's not." He held her stare until she felt the weight of something unspoken pressing against the room. For a moment, she thought he was angry because she touched him. Some people hated needing help, especially men like him. Then his expression shifted, subtle but sharp. "You should have walked away," he murmured. "But you didn't. You stepped into something bigger than you understand." Zariah's spine stiffened. She had no idea what he meant, but the way he said it sounded like a warning wrapped inside a secret. The boardroom doors closed automatically, locking with a soft click that made her heart jump. Cassian turned his back to the table, facing her fully. His voice dropped, no longer cold, just deeply serious, almost personal. The board fell silent, waiting for whatever he was about to say next. Cassian's gaze held hers like he was remembering something painful. Then he said the words that made Zariah's stomach drop, "You're struggling alone, and I'm living alone, but you owe me more than you know." Before she could react, the lights flickered, and someone outside the glass slammed a file against the door, shouting her name. Wow, what a start to Zariah's journey. If her story moved you even a little, please hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video with someone who loves a story full of emotion and suspense. Your support means the world, and it helps me bring more stories like this straight to you. The hospital waiting room felt colder than winter, even though the air conditioner hummed gently above Zariah's head. She sat hunched in a plastic chair, watching nurses rush by with hurried footsteps. Her grandmother had been taken in minutes earlier. Zariah's heartbeat echoed in her ears, mixing fear with helplessness. A nurse finally approached, but she didn't smile. She looked tired, annoyed, like Zariah was an interruption rather than a terrified 16-year-old trying to understand what was happening. You'll have to wait, the nurse said sharply, without meeting her eyes. Zariah nodded, trying not to cry in front of strangers. When another patient arrived, a woman with expensive jewelry, 2 nurses immediately rushed to her side, offering blankets and water. Zariah watched in silence. She didn't need to be told why some people were treated like glass and others like paperwork. She folded her hands tightly, praying Mama June wasn't suffering alone. Eventually, a younger nurse with soft eyes approached Zariah. "Are you here for June Wells?" she asked gently. Zariah nodded quickly. The nurse knelt beside her, speaking in a low voice. "Your grandmother is stable for now. She asked if you made it here safely." Those words lifted a weight off Zariah's chest. But that moment of kindness disappeared just as fast. When Zariah was finally allowed to visit, she walked into the room and saw Mama June lying on the bed, her oxygen mask slightly crooked. 2 nurses were arguing quietly about who was supposed to adjust it. Zariah stepped forward, heart pounding. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. One of the nurses sighed dramatically, as if Zariah was demanding too much. The other adjusted the mask without a word. Zariah sat beside her grandmother, holding her hand carefully. Mama June squeezed her fingers weakly, eyes full of gratitude and exhaustion. Zariah felt something shift inside her, a deep ache turning into determination. She didn't want another family to feel this powerless, this invisible. She wanted to become the kind of nurse who looked people in the eye, who cared without hesitation, who made pain feel lighter simply by showing compassion. Late that evening, a doctor walked in with a clipboard. He barely glanced at Zariah, instead flipping through the papers carelessly. "We're missing her medical history," he muttered. Zariah frowned. She had handed everything to the front desk. "I already gave them her paperwork," she said. The doctor didn't look convinced. "Not here," he said flatly. "It must have gotten misplaced." His tone was casual, but something in his eyes told Zariah it wasn't an accident. She felt anger rising through her fear. Losing paperwork meant delays her grandmother couldn't afford. Zariah stood up, voice trembling. "Please check again. She needs those records." The doctor sighed, annoyed, and leaned in slightly. His next words felt like ice sliding down her spine. "We didn't lose it by accident." He lowered his voice, eyes shifting toward the hallway. "Someone didn't want her treated right away." Zariah entered nursing school with the same determination she'd carried since childhood, but the weight of responsibility grew heavier every month. She worked mornings at a grocery store, evenings at a diner, and overnight shifts as a caregiver when she could. Sleep became a luxury. Hope became fuel. Her grandmother's voice guided her. She sat in lectures fighting exhaustion, scribbling notes between slow blinks. Professors often looked past her, calling on other students even when her hand shot up first. When she answered anyway, some classmates rolled their eyes, whispering that she was trying too hard. Zariah pretended not to hear. Focus kept her steady. Money was always tight. Some weeks, she survived on ramen and prayer. She applied for scholarships repeatedly, getting rejected with strange explanations that never quite made sense. She reminded herself why she was doing this, to help people like Mama June, to change the system that once pushed her grandmother aside. Still, the microaggressions wore her down. A professor once questioned, in front of the class, whether English was her first language, despite her essays being the strongest in the room. A lab partner insisted she handle the simple tasks, claiming he didn't want her getting overwhelmed. Zariah bit her tongue until it bled. During clinical rotations, some patients refused her care. "I want someone else," they'd say, without bothering to hide the reason. Supervisors offered half-hearted apologies. Zariah swallowed her hurt and kept working, proving through patience and skill what others doubted because of her skin. Every moment of competence felt like quiet rebellion. Despite everything, she excelled. Her test scores were high, her technique precise, her empathy unmatched. Some classmates secretly asked her for help studying. She tutored them without resentment. She had promised herself she wouldn't let bitterness shape her heart. Helping others felt like reclaiming the kindness she once needed. But stress slowly crept into her bones. There were nights she sat on the dorm floor staring at her textbooks, overwhelmed by exhaustion and pressure. She cried quietly, afraid of failing, afraid of proving certain people right. Yet every time she broke down, she picked herself up, reminding herself she had survived worse. By the time final season arrived, Zariah was balancing 2 jobs, clinical rotations, and her last exam standing between her and graduation. She studied in 20-minute bursts between shifts, reciting medical terms under her breath while bussing tables. Her dreams felt close enough to touch if she just kept going. The morning of the exam, she entered the classroom early, heart pounding but hopeful. She knew the material. She had worked too hard to fall now. As she took her seat, classmates whispered around her, but she focused only on the test packet in front of her, steadying her breathing. Halfway through the exam, a professor stepped behind her slowly. Zariah didn't think anything of it, until he reached over, grabbed her test sheet, and announced loudly, "Zariah Wells, you're done. You're being investigated for cheating." The room fell silent. And her future, for the first time, felt like it was slipping out of her hands. Zariah had just finished her 12-hour shift when the ER doors burst open, paramedics rushing in with a stretcher. She was exhausted, ready to sign out, but the tension in their voices pulled her back. 33-year-old male, panic attack, heart rate unstable, one said. They guided the stretcher toward her. The man on it looked like he belonged on magazine covers, not hospital beds. His suit jacket hung off one arm, his shirt damp from fear and sweat. His breathing was sharp, short, frantic. Zariah stepped closer instinctively. Exhaustion faded beneath instinct. She touched his wrist gently, grounding him. "You're safe. I'm here." His eyes snapped open. Storm gray. Frightened. Powerful. They locked onto hers with an intensity that startled her. She spoke in calm rhythm she'd practiced for years, trained to soothe panic with steadiness. Slow breaths. "Match me." He tried, but his chest still shook with each inhale. His world was spiraling. Other nurses whispered behind her, recognizing him immediately. "That's Cassian Hart, the heart industry's CEO, worth billions." Zariah didn't care about titles. She cared about the way his pulse raced beneath her fingertips. She guided him through another breath, her voice low and steady. Slowly, the tremors in his hands began to ease. When the doctor arrived, he spoke more to Cassian's reputation than his symptoms. "Sir, you're experiencing acute panic," he explained carefully. But Cassian wasn't listening to the doctor. His eyes remained fixed on Zariah like she was the only anchor in the room. She found herself holding his gaze longer than expected. Once stabilized, Cassian was moved to a private room. Zariah followed with his chart, trying to set aside the strange tug lingering in her chest. She told herself it was routine care, nothing more. Billionaire or not, he was just another patient who needed a calm presence in the storm. Inside the room, Cassian sat upright, breathing normally. But his eyes tracked her as she entered, studying her like she was a memory he couldn't quite reach. Zariah placed the chart beside him. You should rest. Panic attacks can be triggered by exhaustion, stress, or, she stopped when she saw his expression sharpen. He leaned forward slightly, voice raspy from earlier. What's your name? He asked, though not casually. Not politely. More like he already knew the answer. Zariah hesitated, unsure why the question made her chest tighten. She didn't even finish. The intercom buzzed overhead, calling her to another room urgently. She stepped back to leave, expecting him to focus on his recovery. But his hand twitched slightly, as if reaching for her without meaning to. His breath steadied as she turned away, like her presence alone was stabilizing something inside him. She didn't understand it, and didn't want to read too much into it. When she reached the doorway, Cassian's voice followed her. Soft. Intentional. Too familiar. Zariah, she froze. She had never told him her name. Not once. Not even near him. Her heartbeat stilled as she turned slowly, and Cassian's eyes looked at her like he had known her long before today. The scandal hit Zariah like a punch she never saw coming. She woke to dozens of messages buzzing her phone, each notification more alarming than the last. A video of her ER shift, clipped, edited, twisted, was spreading online. It showed her walking away from a patient for 3 seconds, cut to look negligent. In reality, she had only stepped aside to grab equipment, but the internet didn't care. Comment sections swarmed with accusations. Incompetent nurse. She doesn't deserve a license. People like her always mess up. The words crawled under her skin. Her hands shook as she scrolled, disbelief turning into fear. By noon, reporters camped outside the hospital entrance, shouting her name like she was a criminal. Co-workers avoided eye contact, afraid to be associated with her. Even friends stayed silent. Zariah walked into the hospital anyway, determined to defend herself, but whispers followed her through the halls like shadows. Her supervisor pulled her aside before she reached the locker room. He looked uncomfortable, twisting his badge nervously. Zariah. I'm sorry. Administration wants to suspend you pending review. The words hit harder than she expected. She felt her breath catch, her legs wobble. But I didn't do anything wrong, she whispered. He sighed, eyes dropping to the floor. I know. But the video is everywhere. We can't have the hospital's reputation tied to a controversy. Zariah swallowed hard. She wanted to scream that the hospital cared more about public image than truth, more about donors than fairness. But exhaustion muted her voice. Security escorted her out as if she were a threat. Cameras flashed. Someone shouted, "Smile for the scandal." She kept her head down, heart pounding with shame she didn't deserve. Tears blurred her vision, but she refused to let them fall where strangers could see. Pride was all she had left. By the time she reached her apartment, the rumor had grown into a wildfire. Some online posts claimed she had mistreated multiple patients, others said she had been reported before. None were true. She paced her small living room, feeling her world shrink. Everything she worked for felt like it was collapsing. Sitting on the couch, she replayed the video repeatedly. The edit was clever, malicious. Someone had planned this. Someone wanted her damaged. She pressed her palms to her eyes, trying to breathe through the panic swelling inside her chest. If she lost her license, she lost everything, her dreams, her purpose. Just as despair threatened to swallow her, her phone vibrated again. She almost ignored it, expecting another cruel message. But the number was unknown. She hesitated, then answered shakily. A calm voice greeted her. Zariah Wells. She recognized the tone immediately, professional, guarded, belonging to someone from another world entirely. This is Rowan Clark, the voice continued. assistant to Cassian Hart. Her heart stumbled. She didn't know why Cassian would be involved in any of this. Rowan paused, then delivered the message that made her freeze completely. "Mr. Hart wants to see you. Immediately." Zariah followed Cassian into the dimly lit private waiting room, her palms still sweating from the chaos of the last 24 hours. She shouldn't be here, not after the suspension, not after the uproar online, but the urgency in his assistant's voice had pulled her in like a hook she couldn't fight. Cassian sat on the couch, elbows on his knees, breathing slow and deliberate like someone afraid of losing control again. His eyes, usually cold, distant, unreadable, looked strangely human tonight. "Sit," he said quietly. She did, unsure if she should speak first. Cassian rubbed his hands together. "I owe you the truth. At least a part of it." Zariah's chest tightened. "You don't owe me anything." He let out a hollow laugh. "I owe you more than you know." For a moment, silence sat between them like a living thing. Then he lifted his head. "The panic attacks," he began, the words heavy. "They didn't start recently. They've been happening for years, every time I walked into a board meeting, every time I had to sit in a room full of men who smiled at me while quietly trying to bury me." Zariah blinked. "Because of your father?" Cassian's jaw clenched so hard she saw the muscle twitch. "Yes. And no. He built the company. But he also built a legacy of control. Abuse. Fear." He inhaled sharply. "When I was a kid, he made sure I understood that I was only valuable if I performed. If I won. If I stayed silent." The vulnerability in his voice felt almost too raw to witness. Zariah spoke gently. "That kind of pressure leaves marks, Cassian." His eyes warmed just a little at the way she said his name. "And the board," she pressed softly. His expression darkened. "They never wanted me as CEO. I was too young. Too unpredictable. And," he hesitated, gaze dropping to his hands. "Some of them think I shouldn't lead because of my mother's background." Zariah's heart sank. "Because she wasn't white." Cassian nodded silently. "And that," he continued, voice low, "is part of why I recognized you." Zariah froze. "Recognized me, from when?" Cassian's fingers trembled slightly as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded picture. He handed it to her. It was a faded school photo. Kids in uniforms. A classroom Zariah hadn't thought about in years. And there, standing 2 rows behind her, was a young Cassian Hart. Smaller, sharper, watching everything around him with the same intense eyes he had now. "You were the smartest student in that class," he said softly. "Everyone knew it. I remember watching you help others. I remember how some teachers treated you because of your skin, and how you kept pushing anyway." Zariah swallowed, stunned. He remembered her. "All these years?" "I never forgot you," Cassian whispered. Her heartbeat stuttered. Before she could respond, a sharp crack shattered the quiet. Both of them jerked their heads toward the window. Down in the parking lot, a shadowy figure was leaning into Cassian's car, glass on the ground, the door forced open. Cassian shot to his feet. Zariah's breath caught in her chest. Someone was breaking into the CEO's car. And they weren't running. They were waiting. Watching. As if they wanted Cassian to see them. The police arrived too late to catch the person who broke into Cassian's car. The intruder vanished into the darkness as if they'd been swallowed by it. But their message was clear: this wasn't a random crime. Someone wanted Cassian rattled. Back inside the private room, Cassian paced restlessly, running his hands through his hair. Zariah watched him, her nerves stretched thin. "Cassian," she said softly, "who would do something like this?" He stopped pacing. Then something in him seemed to deflate. "I should have told you everything earlier," he murmured. But I didn't want to drag you into this. Zariah tensed. Into what? Cassian exhaled shakily, like he was finally surrendering a secret he'd been holding too tightly. The board wants me out. She blinked, shocked. Why? Because of the panic attacks? No, his voice dropped, heavy with bitterness. Because of who I choose to stand beside. Who I respect. Who I defend. They call it mixing with the wrong people. Her stomach twisted. Wait, are you saying the board? Yes. He didn't soften it. Some of them think associating with certain communities could damage the company's image. Their words, not mine. Zariah felt heat rising in her chest, not embarrassment, but anger. Anger at how familiar this sounded. Anger that her very existence could be labeled wrong by people she had never even met. So they're targeting you for acknowledging people like me, she asked quietly. Cassian looked her straight in the eyes. For respecting you. For not letting them treat you like you're disposable. They've been watching everyone connected to me. Including the people I've defended publicly. Her breath caught. People connected to him. People like her. Her voice trembled. Cassian, are you saying they're watching me too? His silence was the confirmation she feared. There were reports, he said finally. Strangers asking about you at the hospital. Someone requesting your HR file. Someone else trying to access your school records. Zariah's pulse quickened. The room suddenly felt too small. Why me? She whispered. Because you're the easiest target, he answered honestly. They think if they destroy your credibility, I'll collapse under pressure. They don't see you as a person, Zariah. They see you as leverage. She felt a cold pressure settle beneath her ribs. This wasn't just about her career anymore. It was about her safety. Cassian stepped closer, lowering his voice. I'm going to protect you. I swear it. Zariah almost believed him. His eyes carried the weight of someone who meant every word. But life didn't wait for promises. Not when danger was already moving. Later that night, Zariah unlocked the gate to her apartment building, the neighborhood quiet except for distant traffic. She clutched her bag tighter, Cassian's warnings echoing in her mind. You're being watched. She glanced over her shoulder. No one. She took 2 more steps. Then someone rushed her from the side, fast, sudden, deliberate. She gasped as a rough shove knocked her off balance, her keys slipping from her fingers. A voice hissed something she couldn't fully catch, her name buried inside the threat. Her heart pounded as she hit the ground, breath knocked from her chest. Footsteps fled into the darkness. She was alone. Shaken. Targeted. Zariah woke to the faint scent of eucalyptus and quiet humming, someone moving around gently, as if afraid to disturb her. For one disoriented moment, she didn't know where she was. Then memory rushed back, the shove, the voice, the cold ground. Her hand trembled instinctively. A soft lamp glowed beside her. She was lying on a large couch wrapped in a warm blanket, her ankle elevated on a pillow. The room around her was nothing like her apartment. The furniture looked handcrafted, the walls lined with books and dim lights. Even the air felt different, safer, warmer, quiet. A private safe house. Cassian's safe house. She tried sitting up, but a sharp ache shot through her ribs. Before she could brace herself, Cassian appeared from the kitchen with a mug in his hand. His eyes widened the second she winced. You're awake, he breathed, rushing to her side. Easy. Don't push yourself. His voice, normally so controlled, was softer today. Frayed. Exhausted. Zariah forced a small smile. You brought me here. He nodded, adjusting her blanket without touching her skin. He moved carefully, respectfully, as if every inch of space between them mattered. Your apartment wasn't safe. And the hospital, he shook his head. Too many eyes. Too many agendas. She swallowed hard. Did you call the police? I did. They said they'll investigate. His jaw tightened. But you and I both know what that means. She didn't respond. They both understood the painful truth, people like her rarely got justice quickly. Fear formed a small knot beneath her heart. Cassian handed her the mug. Ginger tea. Helps with shock. She took it, her fingers brushing the cup, not him. He didn't force closeness. He didn't hover. He gave her space to breathe. She appreciated that more than he knew. You stayed, all night? She asked. Of course I did. His voice cracked around the words. She blinked, surprised. Cassian Hart, the man who ruled boardrooms, who intimidated executives, who lived like emotions were weaknesses, he looked like he hadn't slept at all. His hair was messy, his eyes ringed with exhaustion. Zariah felt something loosen in her chest. He sat on the coffee table across from her, hands clasped tightly. Zariah, when I saw you on that ground, his voice faltered. He took a quiet breath. I thought, he didn't finish the sentence. She set the mug down. Cassian. I'm okay, she whispered. Not to me, he murmured. Silence settled between them, not awkward, but warm. Healing. Soft like the way sunlight touches a window in early morning. She leaned back against the pillow, her eyes fluttering. Cassian rose and pulled the blanket up slightly, careful not to graze her bruised shoulder. He moved away again, giving her space. Respecting boundaries she hadn't even spoken aloud. That was what made her chest ache the most. Later, as she drifted between sleep and wakefulness, she heard Cassian step outside the room to take a call. His voice was low, hushed, but the walls were thin enough that she heard the weight in every syllable. She's safe, he whispered into the phone. But this can't happen again. A long pause. Then his voice broke, soft, raw, trembling in a way she had never heard before. I can't lose her again. Zariah's breath stopped. Again. Her heart pounded. What did he mean by, again? The question struck her like lightning. Cassian didn't speak for a long moment, just stared at Zariah as if measuring the weight of years she didn't remember. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the heater. Zariah sipped her tea, sensing something monumental was about to be shared. You ever wonder why he paused, searching for words, why we found each other so easily? His voice was soft, hesitant, almost like a secret meant to be whispered into the past. Zariah tilted her head, curiosity sharpening her exhaustion. I don't understand, she admitted. Her voice was small, careful, unsure if she wanted to know. But his gaze held a gravity that demanded honesty. Cassian, she whispered. He leaned back, letting the silence stretch, the weight of his next words heavy with memory. We met when we were 10. I didn't tell you this before, because I never thought it mattered until now. Zariah's breath caught. 10, she repeated, as if the word itself could unlock some hidden doorway in her memory. Something stirred, faint laughter, a classroom, a crowded playground, and she shook her head, trying to grasp it. I was new to the neighborhood, Cassian continued, eyes unfocused, staring at some invisible point from his past. Kids were cruel. Bullies cornered me by the swings. I thought I'd have to endure it, until you stepped in. Zariah's chest tightened, heartbeat jumping. She couldn't believe it. Me, she whispered, nearly afraid to breathe. Yes. You told them to back off. You didn't just speak, you acted. You stood between me and them, and his throat tightened. I've never forgotten that courage. You were 10, but you were, incredible. Her fingers trembled on the cup. She remembered flashes, someone protecting someone else. Could it have been him? Could her 10-year-old self have made such a mark? I don't remember, she said softly, eyes filling with tears. Cassian reached across the space between them, not touching, just bridging distance with words. You don't need to. I remembered for both of us. Every time I've faced fear or cruelty since then, I've thought of you. That's why I recognized you the second you walked into my life again. The room was still. Zariah wanted to smile, to laugh, to cry, but the moment broke with the sharp buzz of her phone. She picked it up, and the message froze her blood. A legal notice had arrived, accusing her of manipulating Cassian Hart for personal gain. Her stomach dropped. Her hand shook as she read the words. Every memory of their connection, the trust, the unspoken bond, now threatened to be weaponized. Cassian leaned over her shoulder, eyes scanning the screen. His jaw tightened. They're trying to ruin everything, and they're starting with you. Zariah felt the walls of safety collapse around her. Zariah returned to the hospital under a cloud heavier than the one that had followed her home. Every step in the hallway felt like walking through quicksand, coworkers' eyes lingering a second too long, whispers brushing her like invisible knives. She had survived viral attacks online. She wasn't prepared for this. Her shift began routinely enough. She checked vitals, prepared medication carts, and greeted patients with the gentle care she had always offered. But something felt off. The usually cheerful morning team seemed tense, as if waiting for an invisible signal. Mara, her coworker from orientation, smiled too brightly, lingering near the pharmacy. Zariah had always sensed Mara's envy, her smirks, her whispers, the way she subtly undermined anyone who outperformed her. Zariah ignored it, focused on the patients. She didn't have energy for drama. But the drama found her. A security alert blared unexpectedly in the staff room. Someone had reported stolen medication. Zariah froze. She had handled the meds carefully all day. Her badge, her procedures, every checkmark verified her accountability. Mara stepped forward, her voice calm but sharp. Zariah Wells was the last to access the narcotics cabinet. Her eyes glimmered with something unreadable. Maybe you should check her station. A cruel smile danced across her lips. Zariah's heart sank. I didn't take anything, she said, her voice steady but edged with panic. She opened her cart, meticulously checked logs, her hands shaking despite her training. Every record pointed to her innocence. Yet Mara's accusation hung like smoke, inescapable. Other nurses whispered, some nodding as if proof didn't matter. Patients glanced curiously from rooms, and Zariah felt the weight of scrutiny crushing her chest. All her hard work, her sacrifices, her sleepless nights, it could be undone by envy and lies. She called the pharmacy manager, who reviewed the security footage with her. The grainy camera angles were suspiciously edited, the cabinet opening conveniently blamed on her badge. Every gut instinct screamed sabotage. Mara had planned this. Zariah realized just how easily people could weaponize her career. Her hands shook as she tried to contact Cassian, needing support but knowing she couldn't ask him to step into this chaos. The office phone rang. A low, official voice spoke. We need you to remain at your station. Officers are on their way. Zariah's pulse jumped. She stared at the doorway, dread solidifying in her stomach. She couldn't breathe fast enough. The police were coming. And she knew, deep in her bones, Mara had made sure this would feel as public, as humiliating, and as final as possible. The moment Zariah saw Cassian step into the hospital, her chest lightened slightly, though tension still gripped every nerve. He didn't rush. He didn't yell. He walked calmly, deliberately, like a storm moving through corridors unnoticed until it hit with force. He found her in the staff room, shaking, pale, surrounded by whispers. His gaze softened the second it landed on her. Zariah, he said quietly, I'm not letting them destroy you. Not today. Not ever. She tried to nod, voice caught in her throat. They "They've made it personal this time," she whispered. Every ounce of exhaustion, frustration, and fear bubbled to the surface. She had survived online attacks, sabotage, even an assault, but this, the hospital turning against her, felt unbearable. Cassian placed a hand gently on her shoulder, not too close, not demanding, but protective. "You didn't deserve this. And I intend to make sure they know it." His tone was quiet, steady, but carried the weight of absolute authority. He met with the hospital director in a small office, the air tense enough to choke on. Cassian didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He simply laid out the evidence, edited security footage, forged logs, staff testimonies. Every word was precise, every fact undeniable. By the end of the hour, whispers had turned to murmurs of disbelief. Nurses and technicians who had feared retaliation now quietly approached, offering corroboration. Cassian's calm force reshaped the power dynamic. He was relentless but measured, a protector and strategist in one. Zariah watched from the doorway, heart pounding. She didn't need to hear every word. She felt the shift, the hospital, once a place of judgment and danger, bending slightly toward truth. Cassian's presence alone seemed to command integrity. But as he turned to reassure her, the hospital director's face twisted with rage. "You think a few witnesses and a billionaire's influence will save her?" he spat, venom in every syllable. "I can make sure her license is revoked permanently." Zariah's blood ran cold. Her career, everything she had worked for, suddenly dangled by a thread. The thought of losing it all, especially after surviving sabotage, nearly made her knees buckle. Cassian stepped forward, unwavering, his eyes like steel. "Try," he said simply. "Because if you do, the consequences won't end with her. This ends now, with you exposed." His words were quiet but absolute. The director's face paled. Behind his fury, a flicker of fear betrayed him. But Zariah could feel the storm brewing. This wasn't over. Threats, manipulation, lies, they were far from finished. And the next move could decide everything. Zariah drove through the streets of her hometown, the familiar cracked sidewalks and faded storefronts stirring memories she had tried to bury. Every turn whispered old regrets, the fights, the neglect, the stares from neighbors who had known her family's struggles before she even understood them. She passed the church she had attended as a child, the one where her grandmother had held her hand during sermons. The wooden doors were chipped, but the bells still rang, faint and comforting. Zariah gripped the steering wheel tighter, letting nostalgia wash over her in small, bittersweet waves. Her childhood home was smaller than she remembered, worn by years of weather and neglect. She stepped inside carefully, inhaling the scent of aged wood and faint lavender. Each corner brought echoes of laughter, arguments, and the soft voice of Mama June guiding her through impossible days. Memories rushed forward unbidden. The times she had stayed up, caring for her grandmother through fevers and nights of coughing. The pride of acing school assignments while facing exhaustion, the shame of teachers who doubted her because of her skin. Pain and triumph intermingled, raw and unfiltered. Zariah wandered to Mama June's old bedroom, running her hand along the dresser she had polished daily as a child. The room had been preserved, almost untouched. Her heart ached with longing for guidance, for the warmth of the only person who had believed in her unconditionally. In the corner of the dresser, Zariah noticed an envelope tucked behind a faded jewelry box. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up. The paper was thick, yellowed with age, and her grandmother's familiar handwriting covered the front, "For Zariah, when you are ready." She sank onto the bed, holding the letter like it was a lifeline. Memories of Mama June's voice echoed, "Your mind is a gift. Your heart is stronger than you know." Zariah's chest tightened with emotion, tears threatening to spill, but she steadied herself, unwilling to break down fully. With careful hands, she unfolded the letter. Mama June's words were measured, full of hope and wisdom. She spoke of courage, resilience, and the importance of fighting for truth and justice, even when the world was cruel. Each sentence felt like a hand on Zariah's shoulder, guiding her forward. Her eyes scanned the final lines, and her breath caught. Mama June had predicted challenges, warning her that her path would be difficult, but also hinting at connections and opportunities that would shape her destiny. The letter spoke of trust, integrity, and the importance of allies in dark times. A sudden knock on the door startled Zariah. She froze, heart racing, the letter clutched against her chest. This quiet moment, this sacred rediscovery of guidance, was about to be interrupted. But it was what she saw next that made her blood run cold, a package left with no note, marked with her name in an unfamiliar hand. Zariah sat cross-legged on the floor of her grandmother's room, the letter opened before her like a sacred map. The sunlight filtered through the dusty blinds, casting soft, golden patterns across the paper. Every word seemed alive, vibrating with the warmth of her grandmother's love and wisdom. Her fingers traced the loops of the handwriting, lingering on sentences that hummed with quiet power. The world will test your heart, Zariah. But know this, you were born to heal, not just yourself, but the man destiny will send. She blinked, heart thrumming. Heal, the man destiny would send. The words echoed, strange and mystical, but they resonated deep in her chest. She remembered Cassian, the storm-gray eyes, the vulnerability he'd shown, the weight of his past pressing against his strength. Her mind wandered through moments she'd shared with him, the safe house, the panic attacks, the whispered fears he never voiced to anyone else. Could it be that her grandmother had known? That she had seen the threads of destiny before they even existed? The room seemed to tilt slightly, the sunlight glowing warmer, the air almost thick with presence. Zariah closed her eyes, letting herself feel the connection, not just to Cassian, but to the lineage of courage and resilience she carried from Mama June. She breathed in slowly, steadying her nerves. I can do this, she whispered to herself. I can protect him. I can fight for him. I can be what Mama June believed I could be. The letter fell onto her lap as tears blurred the words, and yet she felt grounded, ready. Suddenly, a knock echoed from the hallway. Her heart jumped. It wasn't unusual for Cassian to appear at odd hours, but something about the sound carried urgency, weight. She rose and opened the door to find him standing there, pale, eyes strained. Zariah, he whispered, voice unsteady. She took a step forward. Are you okay? He tried to answer, but his knees buckled before he could speak fully. His body gave way, collapsing to the floor in a heap she couldn't have anticipated. Her breath caught, panic ripping through her chest. Cassian. Hold on. She fell to her knees beside him, hands shaking as she searched for a pulse, words tumbling over themselves in her mouth. The warmth of her grandmother's words surged, she had the strength to act. She called his name again, voice steady despite the fear threatening to shatter her. Her hands moved instinctively, trained yet gentle, trying to stabilize him while adrenaline and worry pulsed through her veins. The air felt charged, alive, as if destiny itself waited to see what she would do next. Cassian's eyes fluttered, the faintest glimmer of recognition crossing his face. He whispered something, but she couldn't catch it over the rapid beat of her heart. She felt the weight of fate pressing down, the mystical, painful, urgent truth of her grandmother's prophecy, now alive before her very eyes. Zariah's heart pounded as she knelt beside Cassian, his body trembling violently on the floor. Every second stretched into eternity. The safe house felt impossibly small, the walls closing in, as if the air itself had become heavy with danger. Stay with me, Cassian, she shouted, voice breaking. Her fingers pressed against his chest, checking for rhythm, scanning for signs of distress. Panic surged, but she forced herself to remain calm, he needed her steady hands now more than ever. His eyes fluttered weakly, barely able to focus. Sweat slicked his skin, hair plastered to his forehead. Zariah, he gasped, voice hoarse. It's happening again, the color drained from his face, and fear gripped her chest. She scrambled for the emergency kit, adrenaline making her hands shake. Needles, gauze, oxygen, she grabbed everything she could, following the protocols drilled into her since nursing school. Every move had to be precise, or he could be gone. Cassian's body stiffened. My heart, he choked, clutching at his chest, then went limp for a fraction of a second. Zariah caught him, stabilizing his head, pressing the emergency button for paramedics with her free hand. Time fractured into chaotic beats. She guided him through breathing exercises, monitored vitals, and administered oxygen. Her training, her instincts, every lesson learned from years of sacrifice converged. She whispered words of calm into his ear, grounding him even as terror clawed at her own stomach. He coughed violently, gasping for breath. She adjusted the mask and held his wrist, feeling the thrum of life, fragile yet stubborn, beneath her fingers. You're going to be okay, she said fiercely. Focus on my voice. Focus on breathing. Don't let go. Minutes felt like hours, but slowly, the color returned to his cheeks. His pulse stabilized. Sweat dripped from his brow, but his eyes finally opened, weak but alert. Zariah's hands shook from exhaustion, but relief hit her like a wave, threatening to collapse her to the floor. Cassian reached up, grasping her wrist with surprising strength. His voice was low, urgent. Zariah, there's something you must know about the board. His gaze locked on hers, eyes fierce, carrying the weight of secrets, betrayal, and danger. Her chest tightened. The storm wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Whatever danger he had just survived, whatever emergency she had just navigated, it was only the beginning. And the next truth he would reveal could change everything. Cassian entered the boardroom with Zariah at his side, the air thick with tension and suppressed hostility. The room was elegant, intimidating, every wall lined with mahogany and polished steel, every chair occupied by men and women who underestimated them both. Today, underestimating would cost them everything. Zariah's hands were steady, but her pulse raced. This wasn't the ER, stakes here weren't life and death in the physical sense, they were reputations, careers, futures. She had data, documents, witness statements, everything meticulously gathered to reveal the corruption and racial sabotage that had haunted Cassian for years. Cassian began, his voice calm but ice-sharp. This company has thrived because of innovation, vision, and trust. Some of you have betrayed those principles for personal gain, undermining employees and perpetuating discrimination. His gaze swept the room, landing on those he knew had orchestrated sabotage. Zariah followed, projecting confidence despite nerves tightening her chest. She presented evidence, falsified reports, altered schedules, manipulated files, proof that certain board members had actively targeted employees of color, including her. Every click of the projector drove the truth deeper into the room's atmosphere. Whispers rippled through the boardroom. Faces went pale. Some shifted uncomfortably, others masked outrage with forced politeness. Zariah felt a small thrill, validation, power, justice, all mixed into one fierce surge of adrenaline. This was more than strategy. This was reclamation. Cassian continued, his tone like steel wrapped in velvet. Attempts were made to discredit me, my team, and even allies who fought for fairness. But we have evidence, witnesses, and integrity on our side. The board cannot hide behind titles any longer. A senior member tried to interrupt, waving a hand. This is preposterous. These claims are, Cassian's glare stopped them mid-sentence. Zariah watched the power shift subtly, the once untouchable hierarchy beginning to crumble. The room grew tense as more evidence was projected. Emails, memos, surveillance records, every manipulated piece of information revealed, every lie exposed. Board members whispered amongst themselves, panic creeping into their poised exteriors. Cassian's calm authority, paired with Zariah's precision, was unstoppable. Just as victory seemed within reach, Zariah's phone buzzed. A message notification flashed on the screen. Her stomach dropped. A private photo of her and Cassian, taken during one of their quiet moments at the safe house, had been leaked to the press. The screen glowed with captions questioning their relationship, twisting intimacy into scandal. The timing was brutal. The boardroom, already tense with exposed corruption, now bristled with salacious gossip, threatening to undermine everything they had just achieved. Zariah's fingers trembled over her phone. She looked up at Cassian, meeting his steel-gray gaze. "They're trying to turn our truth into a weapon." Cassian's jaw clenched. "Then we fight back harder. They're not ready for what's coming next." The morning headlines hit Zariah like a tidal wave. Every screen, every news site, every social media feed twisted the story, turning her courage into controversy. Nurse exploits CEO. Scandal in the safe house. Questionable relationship threatens company integrity. She sat at her kitchen table, staring blankly at her laptop, coffee gone cold. Her hands trembled. Each headline, each sarcastic comment, each insinuation chipped away at the fierce confidence she had built over years of struggle. Cassian's silence was worse than the media. Calls went unanswered, texts left unread. She knew he was protecting her, but the uncertainty gnawed at her. Every notification felt like a hammer striking her chest, reminding her she was alone in a world ready to believe lies. Her friends tried to console her, but even their voices sounded hollow. Everyone was too afraid, too unsure to challenge the narrative. Zariah felt the weight of isolation pressing down, her heart sinking into despair she had fought so hard to avoid. At work, whispers followed her like shadows. Patients glanced curiously. Staff avoided eye contact. Even those who knew the truth hesitated, afraid of association. The world she had trusted, the one she had fought so hard to belong to, had become hostile and cold. She paced her apartment, running her hands through her hair, tears sliding down unnoticed. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every act of courage seemed meaningless. The world had chosen to see her as weak, manipulative, expendable. Her soul ached with betrayal. By evening, exhaustion overtook her. She sank to the floor, curling into herself like a child seeking comfort she hadn't felt since childhood. Her phone buzzed again. She glanced at it, heart skipping. A message from Cassian. But it was empty, no words. Just silence, like a wall between them. She whispered into the empty room, "I don't know how to do this without you." Her voice cracked. The walls felt too close, the night too dark. Fear, shame, and heartbreak tangled into a heavy weight, pressing down on her chest with merciless insistence. Then, a soft knock on the door shattered the silence. Zariah's heart leapt. She rushed, hands shaking, and flung it open. Cassian stood there, his usually composed face broken, eyes red, tears trailing down his cheeks. The vulnerability she had never seen before hit her like lightning. "Zariah," he choked, voice trembling. "I couldn't stay silent any longer. I can't." His hands shook as he reached toward her. The world outside, the media, the lies, it all faded. For one heart-stopping moment, only the two of them existed. She realized, with a mix of relief and terror, that the fight wasn't just external. It was deeply personal. Zariah closed the door gently behind Cassian, letting the evening quiet wrap around them. The air felt heavy but safe, a fragile bubble carved out of chaos. She watched him, noticing the weariness etched into his face, the tension he had carried silently for weeks. He sank onto the couch beside her, hands clasped tightly in his lap. "Zariah. I need you to understand why I went silent," he began, voice low and unsteady. Every word seemed measured, as if carefully balancing truth with the weight of guilt. Her chest tightened. "I thought you abandoned me," she admitted softly. Her eyes searched his, vulnerability raw, exposed. "I needed you, and you disappeared." The tremor in her voice betrayed the weeks of fear and isolation she had endured. Cassian swallowed, eyes glistening. "I didn't disappear. I fought in the shadows. The board, they threatened you, Zariah. They said if I didn't resign quietly, if I didn't remove myself from the company, they would ruin you. Blacklist your name. Take away your license. Her hands flew to her mouth. The revelation hit her like a physical blow. All this time, you stayed silent to protect me? Her voice quivered with disbelief and relief. Anger mixed with gratitude in a swirl she couldn't name. He nodded, gaze fixed on the floor. I thought I could shield you without letting you know. But every day I watched the headlines, every rumor about you. I wanted to scream, to protect you openly. But I couldn't risk your career, not even for myself. Tears pricked Zariah's eyes. You risked everything for me, she whispered. The enormity of his loyalty pressed against her chest, a weight both grounding and overwhelming. She reached for his hand, fingers intertwining. I understand now. I forgive you. Cassian finally lifted his gaze, meeting hers. For a heartbeat, they shared a quiet connection, the chaos of the past weeks dissolving into a fragile peace. Words weren't needed. The shared silence carried apologies, reassurance, and a tentative hope for the future. Their moment shattered with the ping of her phone. Zariah's hands froze. A news alert glared on the screen, emergency hearing scheduled, Zariah Wells nursing license review in 24 hours. Her stomach dropped. Despite healing, the storm wasn't over. Cassian's jaw tightened, protective instinct flaring. We face it together, he said firmly. They've threatened, slandered, tried to manipulate everything. But this we fight. Together. Zariah nodded, heart pounding, fear and determination tangled in equal measure. The night deepened around them, quiet and tense, but inside that small apartment, a fragile alliance of trust and love had formed. Outside, the world still threatened, but for the first time in weeks, Zariah felt she wasn't facing it alone. The hearing room smelled of polished wood and fear. Zariah sat at the small table, fingers clenched around her notes, heart hammering. Cassian stood behind her, silent but steady, his presence a shield against the storm she knew was coming. The board members filed in, their faces composed, but the tension was palpable. Whispers and scribbles filled the air as they settled into their seats. Every eye in the room felt like it pierced her soul, judging, doubting, waiting for her to falter. The hearing began. Accusations poured forth like acid, claims of negligence, manipulation, and misconduct. Each word was carefully crafted to undermine her credibility, twisting truth into a weapon. Zariah's stomach knotted, her pulse racing, but she held her composure. Cassian's eyes never left her. His gaze was steady, unwavering, silently reminding her she wasn't alone. She inhaled, reminding herself of every battle she had survived, the hospital sabotage, the viral scandal, the assaults, the betrayals. She had fought for this. She would not back down. Her defense was methodical, precise, and grounded in undeniable facts. She presented logs, witnesses, and meticulous records, countering each fabricated claim with calm authority. The room shifted slightly, murmurs began to ripple, questioning the narrative that had been stacked against her. Just as tension reached its peak, the door opened. A familiar face appeared, Mara's subordinate, the one who had remained quiet during past manipulations. She stepped forward boldly, voice trembling but clear. I have information about the falsified reports, she said. Every eye turned, silence cutting through the room like a knife. She testified, revealing evidence that Mara had orchestrated the sabotage, exposing the lies and manipulations that had threatened Zariah's career. Shock rippled across the board members' faces, some blanching with guilt, others with fear of being implicated. The tide shifted in an instant. Zariah felt her chest tighten, not relief, not yet, but hope. The witness's courage had created a window, a crack in the walls of deceit built to destroy her. She glanced at Cassian, whose jaw clenched, eyes sharp with both pride and fury at the injustice nearly done. The room went silent as the board prepared to vote. Each member picked up their ballot, the weight of decision pressing like a physical force. Every second stretched unbearably long, Zariah's heartbeat echoing in her ears. She braced for the worst, for the collapse of everything she had fought to protect. Cassian leaned close, whispering just enough for her to hear, "No matter what happens, you've already shown courage they'll never understand." Zariah nodded, gripping his hand beneath the table. And then the ballots were cast. The room held its collective breath. The boardroom felt lighter than it had in weeks. The tension that had pressed down like stone was gone, replaced with stunned silence. Zariah's name had been cleared. Her license was fully restored. Relief, exhaustion, and joy collided in her chest like a storm. Cassian stood beside her, quiet but triumphant. The board's corruption had been exposed, resignations and reprimands following swiftly. The very people who had tried to destroy her career now faced accountability. Justice had arrived, not fast, not easy, but undeniable. Zariah sank into a chair, tears blurring her vision. Years of struggle, heartbreak, and danger seemed to compress into this single moment of vindication. She finally felt the weight lift, replaced with a lightness she hadn't known since childhood. Cassian took her hand gently, fingers intertwining with hers. "You fought through everything, Zariah," he said softly. "Not just for yourself, but for everyone who had been silenced, underestimated, or harmed by them." His voice was tender, reverent, filled with awe. A quiet smile spread across her face. She remembered Mama June's letter, the prophecy of healing the man destiny would send. Zariah realized, for the first time, that she had lived up to that promise, not perfectly, not easily, but fully. Then Cassian's eyes gleamed with a secret excitement. "There's one more thing," he murmured. He led her to a small, elegant building downtown. The sign read, "Wells and Hart Clinic." Zariah's breath caught. He had bought the clinic she had dreamed of running since nursing school. Her hands flew to her mouth. You made it real," she whispered, voice trembling. Cassian nodded. "You never stopped dreaming." "Neither did I. Now it's yours to lead, and we rebuild together, side by side, without fear, without doubt." Zariah felt an overwhelming warmth, a sense of closure and hope wrapped together. Every betrayal, every heartbreak, every challenge had led her here, to healing, love, and purpose. Her past and present collided beautifully in this single, perfect moment. Cassian pulled her close, just enough to share the quiet intimacy of victory. "We survived, Zariah. Together. And nothing, no board, no scandal, no darkness, can take that from us." She nodded, heart full, tears flowing freely, smiling through the weight lifted from her soul. As they stepped into the clinic, the sunlight catching the polished floors, Zariah felt ready for the future. The world still had challenges, but they were armed with courage, love, and unbreakable trust. And she knew, whatever came next, they would face it together. To our viewers, Zariah's journey shows that courage, integrity, and love can overcome even the darkest betrayals. If you were captivated by her story, don't miss our next video, where another life-altering tale awaits, full of suspense, heartbreak, and the strength of the human spirit. Zariah's journey shows us that courage, love, and integrity can overcome even the darkest betrayals. If her story moved you, don't stop here. Click the next video to follow another unforgettable journey of heartbreak, redemption, and the power of standing strong when the world is against you. You won't believe what happens next.